I'm so grateful to be in this space of learning with you, and I'm really just so thankful to Rabbanit Eliza Sperling, SVIVAH's Director of Education, who has been feeling the Torah that we need for this moment every single day since October 7th. She's just been so spot on in gathering the spiritual sustenance that we're all craving. So, Eliza, thank you so much for bringing us together like this tonight.
Thanks so much, Ariella. Thank you for everything that you do for our community. My name is Eliza Sperling. I'm the Education Director for SVIVAH. I'm so happy to see each one of you here tonight. I'm really grateful to be together. Tonight happens to be something called Chag HaBanot, which is a Jewish women's holiday where we celebrate female leaders. And from our history, it's a Sephardic holiday. And usually at SVIVAH, we celebrate this with music and a lot of celebration. We felt like this year maybe didn't call for so much celebration, but I really do want us to recognize the women who are valuable to us. So if you want to, if you could, please put in the chat a woman who you want to remember tonight in our gathering on Chag HaBanot, the women's holiday. As Ariella said, please let's remember to treat each other gently with love and respect. No politics tonight. Let's just connect with each other. If you're upset by something that someone said, respond with generosity, knowing that we're all kind of in a hard place right now. The ADL just issued a report that said that since October 7th, there have been 2,000 incidents of anti-Semitism in the United States, a 337% increase. I know that many people in this room probably have either personally experienced or read reports of anti-Semitism, watched videos of incidents that have happened, been concerned about our friends and relatives on campuses. We're living in scary times, and it doesn't help that every time we check our phones or open up the newspaper, we just read about more incidents. So the idea behind tonight is to try to move a little bit deeper, move beyond the fear, and hear from three really wise women who will guide us in Torah and Jewish history to give us some strength for ourselves in terms of what ways that we can respond, and also give us some ideas about what we can bring to the world in order to improve our society and emerge from these really tough times. So here's the schedule for tonight. First, we are going to hear from our three fabulous teachers. Then we'll have a short Q&A. So if you've got questions that you want to ask them, you can text them to me and I will ask them. And then we'll do a candle lighting together. Please, if you can, turn on your cameras. We want to see you. Participate in the chat. We want to hear from you. If somebody comments and you want to respond, even if you don't know them, go ahead and respond in the chat. Let's come together in community. I'm so happy to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Laura Shaw-Frank. Dr. Laura Shaw-Frank, and I have to tilt my phone here. Dr. Laura Shaw-Frank serves as the director of AJC's William Petchik Contemporary Jewish Life Department. She oversees, oh, here we go. Guys, also in your chat. Let's see, sorry. She oversees AJC's Jewish educational initiatives, as well as Jewish communal research and programming. And she also oversees AJC's engagement with university administrators to assist them in preventing and responding to anti-Semitism on campus. You can read her whole bio in the chat. Dr. Laura Shaw-Frank is an amazing teacher. I've had the benefit of learning from her many times. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Eliza and Ariella. I already feel so much more whole being in this space, just because of the way that the two of you opened this program with so much care and so much love. It almost like a little bit, I have tears in my eyes. So thank you, thank you, thank you. The work that I do every day can be very, very difficult, and it's wonderful to be in such a nurturing space. So before I speak, do some teaching, I wanted to mention my grandmother, who was born on the fifth night of Hanukkah, and who was a woman of such unbelievable strength of character, generosity of spirit, care for everyone around her, and passionate love for the Jewish people and Israel. I'm going to show you a picture of her before we continue, just because I want you to revel in the glory of her, as I do still all the time. There she is. That's her on her engagement day to my grandfather. And her name was Elka Candell Goodman. She was a woman who devoted her whole life to helping Jews who were struggling more than she was. She was very poor most of her life, and yet she spent her life gathering clothing, gathering food, gathering resources to help poorer Jews who were around her. Particularly, she helped Jews in Israel. And I was talking to Ariella and Eliza and our other teachers today about her, and I said that I was literally, I think, in my 20s before I realized that you could go to Israel with one bag that was just for you. You didn't have to go with two bags, one filled with things for other people and one for you. I almost thought it was a requirement for getting into the country, because she always sent a bag full of clothing for whatever immigrant children or whatever poor children there were. And I think of her so often as I try to find the inner strength myself to go through this very difficult time, and think of the difficult times that she went through with such grace, such dignity, such fortitude, and such a desire to help the Jewish people. So I'm dedicating my words to her memory tonight. In my family, we dedicate the fifth night of Hanukkah to her every year, and in honor of her, we give tzedakah that night rather than receiving gifts. So that was what we did last night. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about what we're facing right now in the world, kind of try to do a little bit of framing, and then talk a little bit about a piece of Jewish text that's speaking to me in this moment as something that I think we have to offer the world in this very difficult time. So obviously, I know that all of us are holding the horror of October 7th very much on our hearts. It's not even, it's like I speak to friends often, we say it's not even PTSD, it's ongoing trauma, because there are still hostages. There are still soldiers in harm's way in Gaza. My cousin's son, I'm sure many of you have relatives with children, or relatives of your own generation, or grandchildren, or friends who are in harm's way. The Israeli government is still trying to identify remains. And as if that wasn't enough trauma for us to hold, before the terrorists were even out of Israel, the anti-Semitism began to spike, as Eliza was saying, around the world, and in America in particular, as we're thinking about. And this was blaming Jews for being attacked, blaming Israel for being attacked in many ways. There were those, continue to be those, who talk about Hamas terrorism as justified resistance, that Israel faked the whole thing and it was a false flag operation. So much terrible anti-Semitism that we're seeing, particularly against the young in high schools and colleges, harassment, comments, violent harassment, even online harassment, marches through campus that disrupt the ability of Jewish students to get to class, to not just Jewish students, all students, but Jewish students particularly carrying what those rallies are saying, not allowing Jewish students to exist sort of in their own hearts and space on campus. And we feel that it almost seems like the world is not understanding where we are. We see university presidents who don't seem up to the task of confronting anti-Semitism on campus. We see a culture that feels like it's just gone awry, where social media and so many sectors of our society seem so poisoned. And we're sitting here trying to breathe, trying to exist in our own skin, trying to feel at home, trying to feel safe, and struggling enormously with all of those things. the work that I do at AJC is largely with those who are in educational spaces. So kids between the ages of, let's say, 12 to young adults, 25, let's say. And we see them struggling the most. And some of you are them, and some of you, all of us, know them, and hold them in our hearts. I think that what we're facing is a crisis that is building on a culture that has gone awry in many ways. What do I mean by that? And then I'm going to give my Torah teaching. I mean that we have, as a society, devolved into a complete inability to talk to one another. We sit in silos. We sit in, if I am in the red team, whatever the red team is, then everyone who's in the red team, I agree with everything they say, no matter what. I don't scratch the surface. I don't think about it. I don't debate. I just accept. And if somebody's on the blue team, then whatever they say, I don't like. And I'm closed off to it, and I cannot engage with it. And there are a lot of reasons for that. Some of that is due to social media and the silos that social media puts us in. Some of it is the pandemic, which took us out of our ability to engage with others in real life and in real time. But the result of it is we have no ability to dialogue across difference. We have struggled as a society to use speech productively. We live in ideological and opinion silos and identity silos in so many ways. And that is really, in my opinion, what is underpinning so much of what's going wrong in our society, because the war is going on our campus. Imagine what would happen if students could listen to the lived experience of others. Imagine if they could sit down together and say, this is what I'm struggling with in this moment. This is who I'm holding in my heart at this moment. Imagine what could be if those conversations could take place, and imagine the hate that would kind of fall apart and kind of become dust once those conversations could happen. So what do? Changing our culture is going to take enormous investment of strength, of energy, of fortitude, like my grandmother, and also time. We can't count on it happening immediately. We can't count on it getting fixed next year. But I do think that maybe we as Jews, maybe we're kind of up to the task in certain ways. And I'm going to share my screen again and share a source with you that has spoken to me so much in this moment in that regard. There's my grandmother again. Okay, here we go. So this is a source from the Talmud, and it's a source from Tractate Eruvin, which is about the eruvs, the boundaries that surround property on the Sabbath, to make that property that we can carry on, and other things, other kinds of eruvs too. I won't get into all the complications of eruvs, because actually this text has nothing to do with eruvs. I have it on your screen here in Hebrew and Aramaic, but I'm going to read it in English. Rabbi Abba said that Shmuel said, for 3 years, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel disagreed. So Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel were two houses of study, headed by two scholars, and they disagreed about everything. These said the halacha, the Jewish law, is in accordance with our opinion. And these said the halacha, Jewish law, is in accordance with our opinion. Ultimately, a divine voice emerged and proclaimed, both these and those are the words of a living God. However, the law is in accordance with the opinion of Beit Hillel. The Gemara asks, that's kind of the anonymous voice of the Talmud, since both these and those are the words of a living God, why were Beit Hillel privileged to have the law established in accordance with their opinion? The reason is that they were agreeable and forbearing, showing restraint when affronted, and when they taught the law, they would teach both their own statements and the statements of Beit Shammai. Moreover, when they formulated their teachings and cited a dispute, they prioritized the statements of Beit Shammai to their own statements in deference to Beit Shammai. So first of all, I just want to ask you, what does it mean to say these and those are the words of a living God? You can put it in the chat. And I'm going to ask you 2 other questions. close up. All the words matter. Both are correct. Yeah, both are accurate. It's not always about the truth. Good, good. So there can be different opinions, right? The example I always think about when we think about these and those are the words of a living God is, well, certain Jews eat rice on Passover and certain Jews don't eat rice on Passover, but they're both, according to Jewish law, correct. How can that be? Because these and those are the words of a living God and they're different communities of people. Now I have two other questions for you. Why would Beit Hillel prioritize the statements of Beit Shammai? And at the same time, you can answer either one question or both. What do we gain from listening to voices with whom we disagree? I talked a minute ago about dialogue across difference, and that sounds really nice. It sounds great. But why does that help us? Why? What is it that we actually gain? Let's try to name it. What do we gain from listening to voices with whom we disagree? Okay, good. Hillel gave kavod to Shammai. Shows respect, hearing many voices. Great. It's new information and perspective. Great. Great. Why would Beit Hillel prioritize? Why make Beit Shammai's statements priority? If empathy to discover a way forward together. Great. Respect. Amazing. Exactly. All of the things that you're saying, being open to the unknown, beautiful. Humility. I don't have all the answers. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yes, Judy, that's actually something that I think about a lot. It makes us look from the other person's point of view at our own point of view. And what happens? Exactly, Beth, great. We articulate our understanding of someone else's position out loud. We rethink and refine our own thinking. We become humble by listening to others because we realize we don't have the only truth. And we realize that we're speaking from our own perspective. Not that there aren't universal truths, there are. I don't want to make everything about, comparative reality, but listening to others makes us more empathic, makes us more, makes our own opinions more thought out, more thought through, maybe more productive. Maybe we question ourselves a little bit more and make sure that our views are actually ones we truly believe, not just checking a box because we've listened to others. So to close up, I want to say that in this moment of such strife, such impossibility, such seeming cruelty to the Jewish experience, what we're going through in this moment, people tearing down pictures of hostages, people yelling slogans that sound so eliminationist to us and so hurtful. In this moment, we can't solve those things immediately, but what we can bring to America, what we can bring to the world is our resilience of being able to dialogue across difference. And if we can maybe take our wisdom of understanding forever, for thousands of years, what it means to hold the opinion of another and publish an opinion of someone with whom you disagree, prioritize the opinion of another, even above your own, to truly understand what you think, what they think, and to move productively forward, I think we can maybe make a dent in this world. So thank you. Thank you for being here. And I'm so looking forward to hearing the words of my two friends.
Thank you so much, Dr. Laura Shaw-Frank. That was so beautiful. I wonder if before we move on to the next speaker, maybe could you describe what you envision? Like what would that look like?
Well, I think about it all the time for college campuses. What I want it to look like is this: when I saw the presidents giving their testimony before Congress, I thought to myself, they're talking about free speech, but they're talking in a legalistic framework, and they're not thinking about what does it mean to engage in free speech. So what I think needs to happen on campus is I want to see a required class for all college freshmen that's called responsible speech. And what happens in that class? In that class, students learn how to dialogue across difference. They learn how to root themselves in facts, how to understand what conspiracy theoretical thinking is, because there's way too much of that. It's very, very dangerous for our democracy. And how to understand what source material is reliable and what isn't. And through learning those very key things that create cultures of responsible speech, we will be able to get out of some of the mess that we've gotten into. It can't start in college. It has to start below in high school and in middle school. And I think that a lot of schools are doing a wonderful job of that. But if you have children in your life in any way, take a look and see, ask what they're learning about how to have dialogue across difference, ask what they're learning about understanding the perspectives of others, and how to have arguments that are rooted in facts and that are calm and reasoned and thoughtful. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking about. And it's gonna take a long time to get there, but that's kind of what I'm thinking about.
Thank you so much. Ever since I heard you mention this concept of responsible speech last week, I think, I haven't stopped thinking about it, right? And now every time I read the newspaper, I say, but nobody's talking about responsible speech. So I'm sure that we'll have more to talk about that later on. Thank you. Our next teacher is Rabbi Yafa Epstein. She is the senior scholar and educator in residence at the Jewish Education Project, and formerly she served as the director of the Wexner Heritage Program at the Wexner Foundation, where she designed and implemented the educational and leadership experience of volunteer leaders throughout North America. You can see her bio in the chat. Rabbi Epstein, we're so happy that you are here with us and that you will give us some perspectives on Chanukah and how our Chanukah sources can give us some insight into our times today.
Thank you so much, Rabbanit Eliza. And I just want to say it's such an honor always to be with SVIVAH and this beautiful community that you have built, and so many friends and new faces and just beautiful souls who want to be in community together. And it's really beautiful, and it's a huge honor, and it's really lighting up my Chanukah, and I'm very grateful. Thank you for having me. And Dr. Frank, thank you so much for that beautiful Torah. I really appreciate it. And so much there. I wish we could. I want to hear you keep talking for another hour and a half. But it's great to learn from you. Thank you so much. So I wanted to have a chance to look at one of our most ancient sources about Chanukah, and particularly about some of the tension that I think we're feeling here right now. I'm not going to give it away, but I do want to just mention that in general, when it comes to the holiday of Chanukah, the place where we first actually see it in Jewish text is in the Talmud, as opposed to the rest of our holidays, which are biblical, or at least found in the biblical canon. We don't have anything about Hanukkah because of the time period in which it takes place. It's really post-biblical, and as a result, our earliest texts are rabbinic. It is mentioned quickly in the Mishnah in a few places, the Mishnah being written between 0 and 200, but in terms of describing what this holiday is, it's really in the Talmud. And the Talmud is a place where we codify it. Just to make sure we all know, the Talmud, I like to call it the first written down code of oral law. And it's generally thought to be codified, between the years 220 and 550, 600, depending on who you ask. So it's, but it's towards the earlier part of that time period. And it's pretty late when you think about Jewish history. And the reason I'm saying that is because I want us to look at one of the most fundamental texts that we have about it. Not the most fundamental text we have about it is the miracle of the oil, but that we're not going to do tonight. But another very fundamental aspect of the holiday, and I'm gonna read it, and then I want us to sort of talk about the tensions that we find within this text. So I'm just going to share my screen. Also, for those of you who would like it, I'm also going to send in the chat a Google Doc. If anybody wants to access it or have access to it later, you're very welcome to. And I'm also going to share my screen for those people who can't necessarily see the Google Doc or don't want to toggle between the two. But I'm going to pull the screen so I can see your face. That's what I really want. Okay, so if you look at this text, my friends, so here we are. We're in Shabbat. And interestingly, this is also another really fascinating, interesting thing about Hanukkah in terms of its sources. Fascinatingly, the conversation about Hanukkah actually is told to us within the context of Shabbat candles. So actually, the Talmud talks about how we light Shabbat candles. And then in that context, like, oh, hey, we're talking about candles. Let's talk about these other candles. Or really, candles is the wrong word because they're not using candles at this point in Jewish history, but lights that usually were made from oil and wicks. And they talk about the different kinds of oils and wicks that were allowed and the different kinds of oils and wicks that are allowed on Hanukkah. And that's how we get to this concept of Hanukkah. But in that context, I start to tell you all the laws of what Hanukkah looks like. So if you look at source number 1 with me, my friends, hopefully everyone can see it. Yes, just give me a quick thumbs up. This looks good and we're good. Okay, thank you. Great to see you. We're told the following. Rabbanan, our rabbis taught, Ner Hanukkah, the light of Hanukkah, or the lighting of Hanukkah lights, mitzvah lahanicha al petach beito mibachutz. It is a mitzvah to place the Hanukkah lamp, that's why they call it a lamp, right? Because it's not really, it's holding oil. The entrance to one's house on the outside so that all can see it. But if the person lives upstairs, one can place it at the window adjacent to the public domain. Ubeshat hasakana, and in the hour of danger, menicha al shulchano v'dio. You can place it on your table, and that is enough, says the Talmud. Okay, great, beautiful. So before we get to right, so we have 3 different cases. Everybody with me? Okay. Number 1, what's the case? Not a trick question. What's the case in number 1?
There's a comment in the chat.
I see the person may need a comment. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, but that I feel is a why. I first want to ask, what's the case? What's this? Good, put it outside. Okay, good. I want to call that maybe a regular year. Okay, and when everything is great and I live on the ground floor, then I put it outside. Okay. Number 2, if I don't ideally live on the ground floor, which in and of itself is a fascinating conversation for those of us who live in apartment buildings, I live on the 14th floor, right? So what does it mean? So, right, then you put it by the window, and then I suddenly have a new case, which is, but in times of danger, which I don't define here in the Talmud what that means, I put it on my table, and that is enough, as if I'm making up for something. So my friends, I really want to ask you, to put in the chat for me, if you will, what, you see there's a tension here, right? Because I'm sort of, the last case, I'm answering something as if I was supposed to do something, but I don't even know, they haven't told me any reason why I'm doing this. What's the fundamental tension that we are feeling in this text? What are they talking about? What's underneath? So we saw Perstume Nisa here, and I think it was Hava or Ahuva, if you want to elaborate a little bit more. But what do you think okay, beautiful. Public versus private, love that. Beautiful. Keep going, my friends. What's the tension we're drawing out here in this text? Put it outside so people can see it versus private life. Good. Safety. Excellent. Good. Okay. It seems like light is supposed to be shown, but in a time of danger, that might endanger us further. Okay, right? So in other words, there's a danger in that publicity. Good. What else, my friends? How much do we want to show that we're Jewish? Right, beautiful. Identity. How is it, Dayo? Good. I don't know who AC is, but how is it enough, AC asks us. If the point is publicity, then what are we doing right? With the privacy piece. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now. Excellent work, my friends. And the reason why this text I feel is so powerful is because actually, my friends, this is the first time we're meeting the idea that you have to publicize this miracle, that you have to put it outside your house. You with me, my friends? Like, it's not like we have a whole long list of laws about how to publicize the miracle. And then I tell you, 20 years, 100 years, 1,000 years later, by the way, there's an exception. You with me, everybody? The exception is there immediately. The reality is there immediately. And to me, this year, this piece is just bringing me so much comfort, actually, so much it really resonates with me because I feel like this is our reality in so many ways. Are we living in case number one, where it is actually our obligation to put that Chanukiah, put that Hanukkah menorah, put that Hanukkah lamp outside our doors publicly? Or are we living in case number three, where we put it on our tables and that's enough? And I just want to tell you, I don't have an answer to that question. And no one, sorry, I don't mean to be too too bombastic, but I don't think anyone on this call really knows the answer to that question, right? We don't know. And there's no objective right answer, is what I'm trying to say. Some of us might feel like we're in case number one. And actually this year more than ever, I don't know if anyone's ever seen this, there's so much out there. This year more than ever, much more public candle lightings. I'm lighting more Chanukiah. Has anyone seen this before? Maybe someone on this call feels this way. I'm lighting more Chanukiah this year. I'm wearing my Jewish star stronger. I bought one of my coworkers. She was like, immediately I bought the biggest Jewish star they sold on Amazon, right? And I'll tell you the truth, I don't usually wear a Jewish star, but I was like that also. I was like, that's it. I'm wearing a Jewish star, right? Like, people are trying to show proudly their Judaism, to show I am proud and I'm not afraid. And then there are people who are like, no, I'm not doing that. I don't feel, I feel proud, but I don't feel safe. Sorry, I don't feel safe to do that. And I just want to notice that, because I think that tension, first of all, to validate it, it's okay. Either way you feel there. And maybe some days on a Tuesday, I feel like I'm wearing that gold star, Jewish star necklace as big as possible. And the next day I'm like, tuck it in, or maybe depending on where I am, or maybe it's all okay. Like, I just want to make space for us to feel like, because actually the Gemara also, I think, makes space for us to understand that it's actually a subjective question of, is this a time? Now, it's actually fascinating historically. I'll just share this with you because I think it's really interesting. It seems to be that at a certain point in Jewish history, it was dependent on the situation. And then eventually the custom, the minhag, became to actually bring it completely into your home and not to light outside. In Israel, interestingly, in Israel, actually, many people have the custom to light outside. Some people outside of Israel do as well. But the overwhelming majority of people actually light it inside. And that, I think, is an interesting phenomenon about how shifts happen in our experience. But I wanted to like think about this with you all in terms of this. Now, there is an interesting question. This came up in the chat. Okay, first of all, just because I'm lighting inside, beautiful, right? So Talia says exactly, like, this year specifically, we put it outside, right? And on the other hand, right? Right, this is so important. I love what everyone is sharing here because it's so real. We're really experiencing this year, right? Beautiful. So Elizabeth says to us, which I think is so awesome, you can put it on your table and it still allows some light to shine. Maybe. I mean, it's an interesting question. Is that what they meant? Because to me, that's the source seems to be saying, don't put it in the window, dafka, put it on the shulchan. But I think also what's very interesting to me here is this idea of putting it on your dining room table. Like, what is the significance of telling me I put it in the dining room table? I put it in the center of the house, perhaps. I put it where we gather, which is an interesting idea about perhaps this light is accomplishing the publicity and the shining of the miracle outwards. But who is it for in days of danger? Who is it for, perhaps? Someone wrote us. So maybe that's the answer to this question, right? It's about us. Exactly. It's about those people who are sitting around the table. And I want to share with you, I'm going to share my screen again. I want to share with you a piece by Rabbi David Hartman, of blessed memory, who was a leading scholar and teacher and philosopher and leader in Israel. And he says something I think is quite powerful that was, for me this year, was incredibly powerful. And he talks about how, in general, normally the point of Hanukkah, the mitzvah of Hanukkah is, and maybe normally is the wrong word, but standard-wise, right, case number one, if you will, it's about Persumei Nisa. It's about us shining our light outwards. It's about us impacting the marketplace. But he says this, look at this, my friends. I'm going to share this for a moment. He says, here we go. And it's a beautiful article. I really recommend reading the whole piece. But he says as follows: in lighting the Hanukkah lamp, the Jew announces to the outside world, this is my flame. Gaze on this light and know that from this home, a Jewish light burns. If you accept me in these terms, I am prepared to share my light with you and be an active member within a shared universe of experience. If, however, you seek to extinguish my flame, then I shall remove my lamp from the windowsill and place it on my private table to be viewed by my family alone. In times of danger and persecution, the Jew may withdraw into the privacy of their particular framework of experience. He must not succumb to the standards of the marketplace, which denigrate the value of his unique identity and particular way of life. This, I think, is so powerful and important. When the marketplace is ready to accept me and wants my perspective and appreciates, and he says this elsewhere in the article, a multicultural, universalist acceptance of all points of view, then I, the Jew, bring my light to that conversation, right? Right? However, if I am unable to be safe as a Jew in the face of hostility and oppression, the Jew lit the menorah for the members of his family so that the flame of Judaism would be internalized in their souls. Although the marketplaces of history led one to believe that Judaism had died and become a lifeless fossil, in the private corners of Jewish homes, families gathered together, told the story of Hanukkah, recited the blessings over the kindling of the candles, and sang a song in celebration of their people's courage to remain loyal to Torah despite oppression and public derision. Although for Jews, the streets of Western civilization were often dark and bleak, the soul of the Jew was aflame, which is, to me, so powerful. First of all, also just, I don't know if this gives anyone else comfort, but it's not new. It's not a new question. But what I think Rabbi Hartman is saying to us is the Hanukkah lights are a technology that allow us to do both. When we can, and when we are strong enough, and when we are able to, then we shine those lights outwards when the world is ready to accept us. But there are times when the world is saying, I don't want your light. I don't accept you on your own terms. I don't accept your human dignity. I don't welcome you. Then we don't continue shining outwardly. Actually, then we turn inward. Then we say to ourselves, okay, so then the point of the Hanukkah lights is to strengthen our own souls, is to light up our own tables, is to take pride internally. And I think, to me, this is a beautiful idea in so many ways, that we actually have the capacity to use the Hanukkah lights in both ways when we're able to. And we get to decide, when do we want to be a light shining outward? When do we feel that we're being accepted and we want to bring our light forward? And when do we feel like it's time to look internally? And each of you, each of us, and each Jew can really decide this for themselves. But to me, that's like this year, a very comforting piece of Torah. I just want to take a look at the chat and make sure that I didn't miss anything. Isn't this just blaming ourselves for our enemies hating us? Oh, sorry. The problem is that when we feel forced into the closet, antisemitism becomes stronger. Yes, right. Beautiful. So thank God we have experts in how we don't make anti-Semitism stronger on this Zoom, and they can tell you more about that. I think for me, what is powerful about what Rabbi Hartman is saying here is the spiritual sustenance. that the Hanukkah menorah can give us. Even when we feel like we can't shine our light outwards, it can still feed our own souls. And that's what Dio means. And that's enough. And maybe this year, that's enough. And I'm going to pause here and turn it back to Rabbanit Eliza. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Yafa, for those beautiful words. You know, when you were speaking about being inside, it also made me think about the ways that we have all been gathering even more than we had before. And the ways that, so it's not only, you know, just in your own house and being by yourself, but sometimes it's looking for ways of connection within your own community that maybe we hadn't invested in as much before. So it's a lot to think about, and as we know, we're going to have a Q&A later on, and I think we have some really important questions that are going to come up. So thank you for that beautiful Torah. Our next teacher is really working hard these days. I'm sure she always works hard, but especially hard. Rabbi Esther Reed is the Chief Experience Officer at Rutgers University Hillel, home to one of the largest Jewish undergraduate populations in the United States. You can see her bio in the chat. I'll just add that in October 2022, she testified about anti-Semitism on campus before U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Homeland Security. Thank you so much for being with us, Rabbi Reed.
Thank you. It's really an honor to be here and to be with such esteemed guests and these wonderful rabbis and teachers who are with us. So I want to just thank you so much for including me in your lineup of teachers. What I'm going to do tonight is a little bit different. I'm going to be speaking about what it's like to be on campus, specifically at Rutgers these days. And the Torah that I'm going to bring out relates to it, but the actual texts will be towards the end. I want to speak about how it's been a dark place. We've been in a dark place and how hard it's been in the last 2 months. And so with that, I'm going to share my screen here. So immediately after what happened, and we found out about what had happened in Israel on October 7th, it was a holiday time. It was a time when many of us were in the midst of celebrations, and some of us didn't really fully know what was happening until Sunday night, October 8th, when people who hadn't been on their phones turned on their phones for the first time. So we very quickly organized a massive vigil with close to 500 students. This is sort of the main gathering point on campus. It was co-sponsored by Hillel and Chabad, an organization called the Rutgers Jewish Experience, and AEPI, the Jewish fraternity on campus. And you can see that there are so many students here, and we're seeking comfort. We were in shock, and we're looking for a way to comfort one another. And want to highlight in particular some extraordinary female students that we had, since we're marking Chag HaBanot and talking about women's strength tonight. We had women who were leading some of our songs and in leadership roles as part of the vigil. And as the vigil was ending, I walked up to a student, not one of the ones pictured here, but another student. She was hysterically crying, just sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And I went to her and I asked her, you know, are you okay? And she had just that moment gotten the news that one of her friends was killed from the Nova dance party. And I tell this story because we all know that it's a small, very, very connected Jewish community. Across the world, we're a small Jewish community. And we all have many connections to people who either died on October 7th, were injured on October 7th, have since been called up to the military. And this isn't a faraway story. And I talk about that on campus here with non-Jews for whom it's a very faraway story. And it's not personal at all. And so, we seek to comfort one another in these dark times. It was also difficult. Oh, before I get into other things, I want to ask a question about how you sought comfort. How did you mourn? And how did you react? Going back to that immediate aftermath. And this is something that you can choose to put in the chat. Sorry, let me stop sharing for a moment so that we can see each other if there's reactions that you have in terms of how it was for you. Elisa, I'm new here as a presenter. Do we call on people who want to also speak, or is it just the chat? I don't know how you do things.
Let's do the chat now, and we can have people speak later.
Okay, so Jewish ritual community gatherings were very grounding. Someone who was a security volunteer got into their uniform and stood outside their synagogue, which is really extraordinary. The reaction of anger and defense. Having a really hard time, learned about it at shul in a way that the rabbi assumed everyone already knew. Being very confused until after the holiday and could really learn the details. Reciting Psalms, which was very, very comforting. Being shocked, having no words, feeling sick. I mean, all of this speaks to me and makes sense to me as well. And Yafa, still in the beginning of mourning. Yeah, I saw a post on social media. How can they be celebrating Hanukkah when it's still Simchat Torah? It's like we're still living in the shock of that time. Brought up a significant amount of trauma based on a history of sexual violence. I'm sure that's very heavy. And getting over it as best as one could before this, but not knowing whether you can ever get over this, which is understandable. Going to Minyan to say Kaddish, sending voice notes to friends and family in Israel at all hours, sending love and hugs, crying daily, doom scrolling, aren't we all? Trying to connect to experiences, live it alongside family in Israel, encasing ourselves in good memories and listening to music, shocked, senseless, retreated from some friends who were silent. Yes, that's been disappointing, the silence of some of our friends. And doing some drawing, artwork. We had an opportunity here at Hillel for artwork as well. So I'm going to continue to write as much as you'd like, but I'm going to go back to part of my presentation. So one of the things that we did is we brought the counseling center to Hillel, and we had a processing space where students could process their feelings in the immediate shock. It was very, very helpful, not only for students to share their feelings, but have the people in the counseling from the counseling center talking about it's normal to feel the things you're feeling and it's okay. We also found that the Dean of Students office was incredibly helpful in supporting students who couldn't go to class during that time, who couldn't do their schoolwork during that time. And Dean of Students reached out to faculty members and said, you must excuse this student. And so that was also something that I think was very meaningful for those students. And then I want to talk about other things that were also a little bit challenging in the days and weeks since then that we've experienced here at Rutgers and how we've moved forward through that. And so there's an organization on campus called Students for Justice in Palestine, and they have been incredibly organized and active. They have had a rally or a vigil or a teach-in at least once a week, every single week since October 7th. And as of today, because they violated so many university rules and regulations, as of today, they've been suspended by Rutgers University. But over the last 2 months, it was a constant barrage of anti-Israel activity that was very painful. This is the same space where we had our vigil on October 9th, the center of campus. And it's been very hard for our students constantly reporting bias incidents that they experienced. There's an AE Pi fraternity at Rutgers, which unfortunately has been egged on a number of occasions, specifically Yom HaShoah 2 years in a row, the Holocaust Memorial Day, where they were doing a 24-hour outdoor reading of the names of Holocaust victims. Their building got egged during that time. This was all before October 7th. And then Rosh Hashanah 2022, their building was egged as well. And then AEPI is known as a Jewish fraternity. It often has an enormous Israeli flag that goes out the window above that front door. So you can imagine that it's very visible. And there is a social media platform that most of you probably have not heard of called Yik Yak, YIKYAK. And on Yik Yak, you can post something completely anonymously. So we had someone post on Yik Yak, there is an Israeli at AEPI, go kill him. And this was while Students for Justice in Palestine were hosting a rally on the steps of Brower Commons, that picture I showed you before, like one of those rallies. And this was directed Palestinian protesters. There's an Israeli at AEPI, go kill him. Even though it's supposed to be completely anonymous, we don't know who this person is. The perpetrator was actually identified. The police were able to use the social media company, be in touch with them directly, identify the person. He was criminally charged. He's actually not part of Students for Justice in Palestine. This process is going through the Student Conduct Office, and terroristic charges were filed against him. But those poor AEPI brothers were afraid in their own home that somebody was going to come and try to harm them. I mentioned egging at AEPI before. A couple weeks after that incident, we had a couple of brothers who were walking home at night, walking back to the AEPI house. And as they were approaching their home, there was a car idling outside the building. And as they walked to their front door, somebody jumped out of the car, threw eggs at them, and used, I'm not going to say the word, effing Jews, as they threw it at them. And one of the eggs hit a student in the back of the head. Fortunately, it wasn't the face, where he could have been injured in the eye or something like that. They called the police, but by the time the police came, the car was gone. And so we don't know who did that. And it was a scary time for Jewish students just to be themselves, to be on campus. Some positive things, our students organized a bake sale to raise money for Magen David Adom, which is the Israeli response corps, kind of like, I guess, an equivalent of the Red Cross. And that you can see, first of all, it's all women. How amazing are these women who themselves organized this bake sale? They either baked things themselves or purchased items for sale. And this is right outside the Hillel building where they are doing their bake sale. And they raised close to $4,000 in a single day. And they donated it through Bloomberg, where it was being matched dollar for dollar to go to Magen David Adom. So not only are these really talented and extraordinary women, they're smart too, because they knew to donate it through Bloomberg, where the money would be matched. We had hostage posters that our students put up and then were pulled down. And you can see here an Instagram post where it says, another student seen at Rutgers University tearing down posters of hostages. And this was very frustrating, to have students putting posters up and other students tearing them down, and students putting posters up and other students tearing them down. We even had students putting up posters at a university bus stop, and another student shouting at them, berating them, which was put, we actually have the video footage, and saying, "You're liars. This is all not true," which is crazy to me now that the hostages, some of them, of course not all, have been released. So how is this a lie? How is this not true? We have, the whole thing is just, the amount of misinformation is really disturbing. So we responded by having an enormous rally back at the steps of Brower Commons, the main gathering point on campus, where we had students have a gathering place, and we had a vigil. We read the names of all of the hostages. We had posters there. We got a lot of press coverage of that. And we also responded to the negativity by doing something that we wanted to do to show the truth that the hostages had been kidnapped. And we did one of the hostage table displays, the Shabbat table displays, with empty chairs including high chairs and sippy cups and all of those things that you may have seen at other hostage displays. I think the highlight of Jewish Pride for us was the march in Washington, D.C. We brought 2 full busloads of Jewish students from Rutgers Hillel alone, and other Jewish organizations on campus brought other busloads of students. I mean, look at these extraordinary women who, with their Israeli flags in their hair, draped around them like capes, superheroes who are standing up for Israel. We had an Israeli student who told me that it wasn't until they arrived in Washington, D.C. and were in the middle of the march that they realized they had been carrying this weight and had been feeling this heaviness. And suddenly it was lifted by being in a sea of Jews who were all proud to be Jewish, and how meaningful it was for that student to be able to not feel that burden that they didn't even realize that they were carrying. And so with that, I want to actually switch gears a little bit to do a little bit of Torah teaching about turning things around and thinking of things in a positive way. And this teaching comes from Stephanie Goldfarb, the Director of Educational Initiatives at Hillel International. She has taken texts from Birchot HaShachar, the beginning of our prayer service every morning, and she has given it, been able to identify what's the bigger concept in each of them. So I'm not going to go through all of them. If you're familiar with them, there's quite a few, but I'm going to do just a sampling. So the first one here, and this is her translation, I thankfully acknowledge you, Adonai. You have given me understanding to see differences clearly as between day and night. And she has put together this on little cards, business size cards, on one side with the blessing, on the other side, the concept. This is the concept of perspective. What does it mean to have understanding, to see clearly, to have perspective? And I was going to ask everyone to write things into the chat, which you still can, but I realize I'm short on time for my allotted time slot. So I'm not going to read what you write, but think about anything in the last 2 months where it's given you perspective, where you've realized something, where you've been able to see things clearly as a result of what we've been through as a Jewish people and how that's meaningful for you. I'm going to move on because of time, but I hope that you'll consider doing that. And then the next one is, I thankfully acknowledge you, Adonai, for making me a Jew, Yisrael, a God wrestler with an enriching heritage. Now, in some traditions, this text is written in the negative, Shelo Asani Goy, for not making me a non-Jew, but this is what we in the conservative movement use for our text, and other groups do as well, in the positive, for making me a Jew. It's an affirmative. And so this here is the value of Ga'ava Yehudit, Jewish pride, to be proud to be a Jew, that I am proud that I have been made this way and proud of my heritage. I'm not going to back down when someone tears down a hostage poster. I'm not going to be embarrassed when there are people protesting in the streets. I'm proud of who I am. And I never read this blessing before, thinking about it in terms of Jewish pride, but it's actually what it's all about. The next one, I thankfully acknowledge you, Adonai. You open the eyes of the blind, providing sight and insight. And that is ha'atzama, empowerment, empowering others. And how much of what I do on campus, I try to empower others, and how much we empower our fellow Jews. And so the idea of pokech ivrim, opening eyes, helping people to feel proud of who they are and to have that empowerment. And the next one, which is either our last or second to last, I thankfully acknowledge you, Adonai. You strengthen the bent, removing what pushes us down. And that is insight, havana, to be able to, actually, I think, I think that I reversed them. I think the previous one was opening the eyes was insight, and this one was empowerment. But my mistake on this slide, I made a mistake there. And finally, I thankfully acknowledge you, God. You strengthen the weary, staying with us even when we're exhausted. And it's definitely been an exhausting time. in the last 2 months, the concept of fortitude, that God gives us strength, that God helps us, even when we're exhausted, which many of us are these days. And that brings me to my final piece that I want to share. I know we're going to have the Q&A in a moment, and we're also after that going to do candle lighting. And so I wanted to tell a quick story about a candle that I recently learned. There are all different Jewish ethnicities. Jews have lived in countries all over the world. And I just learned that there's an Italian tradition that on Tisha B'Av, on the saddest night of the year, when we are mourning the destruction of the first temple and the second temple and the expulsion of the Jews from Spain and so many tragedies that have happened in Jewish history, that we light a single candle and use that candle in order to read the scroll of Lamentations, Echa. And that what the Italian Jews would do is take that special single candle that was used on Tisha B'Av and then save it until the first night of Hanukkah. And for Hanukkah, they would take that very same candle and they would use it as their shamash to light the first light of Hanukkah, to go from sadness and mourning to celebration and recognizing Jewish victory. And so it's my bracha, it's my blessing for you all, that all of you can have that fortitude, that strength, and be strengthened by us being together tonight and with one another. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Reed, and thank you really to all of our amazing teachers. Okay, so now's the time for some Q&A. If you've got questions, put them in the chat. I've already gotten a couple, so please go ahead, think about what our teachers have said and start to formulate your questions. I'm going to start by asking a question that's really for me, and that is, you've told us a lot of Torah and taught us about how to think about things globally, generally, for all of us. But I wanted to ask you if there's a piece of Torah or tradition that has been especially sustaining for you at this time. Anybody who wants to start?
I keep thinking of Esther HaMalkah. I often teach about Esther HaMalkah anyway, particularly when I'm talking to young advocates, particularly women who I'm training or teaching, mentoring to become advocates. And I think about her being in the palace and having to use really strategic thinking about how she was going to make the change that she knew she needed to make. I think about that all the time and try to find my inner Esther as I'm facing some of these spaces that I find myself in where I'm not sure how I'm going to get my Jewish voice across and how I'm going to explain my story and our story in a way that is going to fall upon ears in the right way. And I think about how the rabbis speak about Esther and how she formulated her message in the way that that would work for Achashverosh. I'm actually, in a second, I'll go find it. I have a source actually that I'll put in the chat. That's why I draw upon her all the time in my head.
Wonderful, thank you.
I'll just share that this year I read the Hanukkah miracle story a little differently. We usually say that the miracle of Hanukkah in the Talmud is that they had one little cruse of oil, and it was supposed to last for one night and it lasted for 8 nights. But earlier in the story, it tells us that after they're in the middle of a war, actually, and when they're able to reconquer the temple and take it back from the Greeks, they searched for the oil. And what must it have taken for them to have the faith that there would even be any oil? Like, just the fact that they said, you know what, we have no idea actually if there's going to be any oil, but we're going to look. And it might feel too hard sometimes it feels hard right now to celebrate and to find the light, but I feel like before we even can find the light or find the miracle, we can also just look for the faith to begin to look for the light. So just that beginning, I think, is also a miracle. That's what I'm thinking about this year, just the willingness to look.
And I've been thinking about, I don't know, Laura, if you said this when you were talking about Esther, because I was catching up on the chat from when I wasn't looking at it during my presentation, but the part where Mordecai says to Esther, perhaps you were put into this place at this time. Did you say that just now?
I didn't. I
Okay.
didn't. I was thinking it, but I was
Yeah.
focusing kind of on her finding herself in this
Yeah.
in a non-Jewish space and how she's going to advocate for herself. But
Yeah.
I think about that all the time.
I keep this on my desk. Never forget the difference you make. And I have it facing the students. A student comes to see me and they see this. And I don't talk about it. I just have it there. They should know that every single student makes a difference and that they have the opportunity. You know, our student president, when he ran to be the student president of Hillel, he had no idea he was going to be in the midst, like leadership in the midst of a war and all these things happening on campus. It's not what he signed up for, but he's risen to the occasion and has handled it beautifully. And so I feel like each of us has the opportunity to be an influence on the world and to think about the people that you know and the ways that you can make an impact, that you've been put into the place you're in and the relationships you have for a reason.
Thank you. Okay. Is Melissa still here? I know Melissa had a question about conversation, especially with social media. Oh, there you are, Melissa. I see you.
You want me to unmute?
Yeah, unmute.
Okay. Sorry, the question was, how do we manage how do we manage when social media seems to be the way that many people learn what's going on in the world these days, and there isn't any filter in terms of truth and not truth. Pictures are doctored. People share outright lies that are ridiculous to many of us, but claim they are truth. And so it's not even seeing things from different perspectives anymore, or having people exaggerate. We're fighting what seems like a war that we can't win anymore. And how do we manage that?
So I have two recommendations. My first is, if there are young people in your life, you talk with them about it. I have the tremendous privilege. I have 3 children. I am raising 3 strongly feminist boys. And, you know, they're teenagers and they're on social media and we talk about it. And one of them came to me the other day. I was just, you know, sitting at the dining room table, using my laptop, doing some stuff. And he said, oh, this video just popped up. Who's Noam Chomsky? He's talking about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. It's like, let me tell you about Noam Chomsky, right? Now, I knew about it, so we could talk about it. That's piece one, is if you have the opportunity to influence young people, to talk about it openly with them. Piece two, sometimes you need to recognize that there's a lot of negative things out there, and sometimes you won't be able to transform what's there. And sometimes it's overwhelming and you need to take a break. I have students who are taking a break from social media because it's just too toxic. So I would say, you know, be an influencer in a positive way when you can, and when it's too overwhelming and it's bad for your mental health, just don't.
Yeah, wise words, Rabbi Esther. I'll just add that we recommend to the young people, particularly young people that we whom we work with, because a lot of the most toxic stuff seems to be now on Instagram and TikTok, where young people tend to tend to be, is never ever get into a debate with anyone on social media, even if you know them. There's no point. No one was ever convinced by a debate on social media. If there's like some influencer or some person who has posted something that's offensive to you, just click away from it. Don't get in a fight about it. There's no point. If there's someone that you know who's posted something that is offensive, that is hurtful and anti-Semitic, and you feel that you can talk to that person in person and have a conversation with them where you can approach it with curiosity and a questioning attitude, that's open to hearing an answer and opening to then pushing back and explaining to them why it was so hurtful to you and why it was anti-Semitic, then do it. But don't feel the obligation to do it. That can be a really big burden. Sometimes it helps to go to someone else to help you with that, an advisor in school or a teacher or a trusted another adult in your life who can help you navigate that moment of seeing someone you know post something that is hateful and hurtful and anti-Semitic. And the other thing is to try to also fill your feed with things that are going to uplift you, with source material that's going to be useful to you, with people who are using social media in productive ways to spread truth and to support the Jewish people. Try to inject some of those into your feed. And I just want to underline and highlight what Esther said. Stay off of it as much as you can. It's a very toxic place, and it's a fake place. It's a place where the loudest and the more loud and more extreme you are, the more popular you are. And if you go into it knowing that that's what it is, and that the companies themselves are working so hard to agitate you and to make you upset and to make you click further, and it's all kind of a mind game that they're playing on you, get out of it. Embroider, cook, knit, play ball, hang out with other people, watch a beloved TV show, and get off of it.
Another question. Well, there are some, I'm just seeing this question from Minda about ideas to break through the silence from former real friends. How do you repair relationships after what might feel like a betrayal?
Well, don't text. That's what my students would do. They would text one another. If a relationship's really important to you and you want to repair the relationship, invite them to meet in person for a cup of coffee. And the second best choice, if they're in a place very far away and you can't meet in person, is a Zoom. And to use I statements and talk about my experience. Last night we did an interfaith dialogue on campus, and the Jewish students were talking about their experience in the I voice. I've experienced this, I feel that. And there were students who are Muslim. There's a Palestinian student whose family was from Ramallah, and she was talking about her experience. And I feel like the best kind of repairing a relationship is speaking from your own experience about, I feel hurt, I've had this experience, whatever it might be. That's my advice.
I totally, completely agree. And I also would just add that you shouldn't feel that you need to compromise your core beliefs. This is something I learned from a dear friend of mine who works in the allyship space and who's taught me an enormous amount. He works in Muslim Jewish allyship work. And it's one of the don'ts that he always tells me about allyship, that yes, use I statements and listen to the other person and yield to hear the other person. But at the same time, don't give up on core beliefs. Don't decide that something wasn't anti-Semitic when it is. Honor that in yourself.
Do you want to add something, or I have one more question. I wish I had time for 10 more questions. We've talked today about kind of the balance between going inward and going outward. And I've noticed in the chat and even in my own responses that it's kind of uncomfortable, right? Like to go inward is really helpful sometimes, but it first of all, it might feel like you're giving up, or it might feel like you're no longer seeing the other because you're only seeing those inside. And then going outward is also difficult. So how do you balance like really being in a difficult space, a space where one feels betrayed or unsafe, and also being able to actually hear the other and see the other? An easy one to end us off.
I think you have to know when to engage and when to disengage, and to know that you don't have to be one way or another, even daily. You can engage and disengage even during the course of a day. Like today, I was speaking at an independent school this afternoon about anti-Semitism. And that was one type of experience for me that was emotionally exhausting in its way. But now I'm in this space that is this very Jewish space. It's very nurturing. And I don't feel like I have to like hide anything about how I feel or who I am. I could just like let it all hang out. And so I think that both of them can live together. At least for me, they're very much living together in my life on a daily basis. And I'm so grateful for the Torah that both Rabbi Yaffa and Rabbi Esther shared because of that, because I think it so honors the experience that so many of us are having about making that balance.
I just want to add one thing to what Dr. Frank said, which is you don't have to do it all at once. Like, I think there's a lot of pressure right now in our world to like engage and show and speak up and use your voice. And like, you don't have to be ready for that right now, actually. Like, to me, it's important, Rabbi Dr. Frank taught us the text about Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai and being in dialogue, even though there was fundamental differences between them, but also like, also it was Beit Shammai. They knew them. It's not like they necessarily, went out. Like, I don't know, but I don't think the like Hasmoneans, Hashmonaim did not like engage the Greeks in dialogue. You have to know when someone is sitting down with you to understand you and can engage in that, and when you can't do that, and like you have to be allowed to say not right now. Like it's as Rav Hashem Barach, one day we will like live out with God's help. We will live out what the beautiful vision that Dr. Frank like laid down for us about real dialogue and real, but it doesn't have to happen. I think right now everyone is mourning in such a huge way, and we're very raw. And this might be a time when it's okay to say, I need to take care of my community right now. I need to take care of my family. Of course, we are so blessed to have many allies. I don't mean to say that there are not many in the non-Jewish community who are stepping up for us and speaking for us. But I think that it's also okay to say right now we're going to be, in community in a very internal way. And like those people who can be ambassadors, like Rabbi Reed and Dr. Frank, like it's amazing and beautiful. And you have to know yourself. Can I be that ambassador right now? Or can I say, like, okay, I have to be in my community and I'm not ready to do that right now. I just want to like encourage you to listen to yourselves and know what you're ready for. And like, it's true, we have some fractions in our relationships and they can be healed. They can be healed, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they can be healed right now. And that's okay, I think, to give it some time and space and to honor yourselves.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that wisdom. Thank you for your beautiful teachings to Dr. Laura Shafrank, Rabbi Yaffa Epstein, Rabbi Esther Reed. Thank you so much. Well, it's still Hanukkah, so we are going to light our candles. If you've got candles with you, please go ahead and take them out. If you don't have candles, that's fine. We'll just light them together. We'll watch Dr. Shafrank. All right, so Dr. Shafrank, please lead us.
Okay, I'm gonna light my shamash here. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Chanukah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim lavotenu bayamim hahem ba'azman hazeh.
Wow, this is so beautiful. Should we sing mezuzah, the first stanza?
Osur Yeshuati Lechana Elishabeach. People can unmute and sing with me if you want. Ti. We have a cacophony.
Wow, that was so beautiful. Zoom totally messes it up, and yet it's probably the most beautiful thing I heard all week. Thank you so much. And I want to remind everyone that we do candle lighting together every night of Hanukkah at 8:30 to 8:45 p.m. Eastern Time. Tomorrow night, Dr. Miriam Udell will lead us in a candle lighting, and on Thursday, Rabbi Jen Gubitz will lead us. So please come and join us. Please stay connected with us in our private SVIVAH Facebook group. We'd love to keep showing up for each other, and the link is in the chat. Thanks for being with us tonight. And next week, on Tuesday, December 19th, we're going to have a follow-up conversation, and Rabbanit Dahlia Davis is going to tell us about that.
Thank you so much. So next week on Tuesday night, February 19th, from 8 to 9:30 p.m. Eastern, we are going to have an opportunity to continue to explore the themes that came up tonight, the themes of fear, of embracing our Jewish identity. We're also going to delve into the idea of what it's like to be an American Jew during December and what that feels like, particularly this year. And we're going to have an opportunity to make art as well, and see what feelings come up and what expressions we have resonating with us and sitting on our hearts. So please look out for information upcoming in the next couple of days and register and join us for that event. And we can continue the conversation at that time together. We'll stick around for a bit. And we'd love to hear what you came away with from tonight's experience and from all the beautiful learning we just experienced together.